Every dispute holds two different sides. Every objective lens demands honesty. Knowing your fundamental rights, securing absolute justice.
Good afternoon. Roll that window all the way down. What are you doing out here on my highway, huh?
We were on our way to a meeting, officer.
Meeting can wait. Step out of the car, both of you. Let's go. Don't make me ask twice.
Yes, sir.
And don't get cute with me. You're on the shoulder of an interstate. That's not a rest stop.
Hands where we can see him.
Officer Matt Doyle saw a black couple in a nice SUV on the interstate and made a decision in under 4 seconds. He pulled them over, approached the vehicle with attitude already loaded, and told the driver that he looked nervous, which in Doyle's mind was reason enough for anything. He threatened to search the car, threatened to call K9, and made sure they knew exactly who was in charge on that highway. What he didn't know was that he was standing between two federal marshals and a fugitive who was slipping further away with every second Doyle spent throwing his weight around, and that his body cam was catching every word. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Marcus Webb was 38 years old, and he had spent the last 12 years doing the kind of work most people never hear about. He was a U.S. Marshal, not the kind who stands outside a courtroom door, but the kind who gets called when a dangerous fugitive slips through the cracks and nobody else can find them. He had tracked criminals across 6 states, worked cases that stretched for months, and built a reputation inside the agency as someone who was calm under pressure, no matter what the situation looked like from the outside. That calm wasn't something he was born with. It was trained into him, tested in the field, and earned through years of walking into situations where the wrong move could cost someone their life. That Tuesday evening, Marcus was behind the wheel of a black GMC Yukon, moving steadily along Interstate 78 in New Jersey. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving. He was doing exactly 67 miles per hour in the right lane, keeping a careful 3-car distance between himself and a silver Honda Accord roughly 400 feet ahead of him. Inside that Accord was a man named Derek Holt, a convicted armed robber who had cut off his ankle monitor 9 days earlier and vanished. The marshals had been hunting Holt across 2 states, and that evening, after weeks of dead ends, a tip had placed him on that exact highway heading toward a motel just outside of Phillipsburg. Marcus and his partner had been trailing him quietly for the last 11 minutes, staying back far enough not to spook him, but close enough not to lose him. Sitting in the passenger seat was his wife, Dana Webb. She was 36, and she held the same federal badge he did. Dana had joined the Marshal's service 8 years ago after 4 years as a military police officer, and she was the one who had cracked the tip that put them on Holt's trail in the first place. She had spent 3 days working a network of contacts until one of them came through with a plate number and a direction. Right now, her eyes were fixed on that silver Accord, and she had her radio ready in her lap, quietly coordinating with 2 backup units that were staged further down the highway, waiting for the signal to move in. They were close. They were maybe 5 minutes away from ending a 9-day manhunt. That was the moment Matt Doyle decided to run their plates. Doyle was a 7-year veteran with the state police, assigned to highway patrol on the I-78 corridor. He was 34 years old, broad-shouldered, and had a way of carrying himself on the road that his colleagues either admired or quietly complained about depending on who you asked. He had received 2 formal complaints in the past 3 years, one for an unlawful search, one for use of excessive language during a routine stop, and both had been quietly resolved without serious discipline. People who worked alongside him described him as someone who trusted his instincts. People who had been on the receiving end of those instincts described something else entirely. Doyle had been sitting in a patrol cutout near mile marker 34 when the black Yukon rolled past. He watched it for a few seconds, pulled out, and ran the plate. The vehicle came back clean. Registered, insured, no flags. But Doyle had already made up his mind. He hit his lights. Marcus saw the blue and red flash in his mirror and felt his jaw tighten. He didn't panic. He didn't speed up. He signaled, guided the Yukon smoothly onto the shoulder, and put it in park. Dana looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said a word, but they both understood exactly what was happening and exactly what it was going to cost them. Up ahead, the silver Accord kept moving, steady and unbothered, growing smaller in the windshield with every passing second. Doyle stepped out of his cruiser, adjusted his belt, and walked toward the Yukon like he had all the time in the world. He didn't even know he was already out of time. Doyle reached the driver's side window and didn't wait for it to come all the way down before he started talking. He told Marcus he had been driving erratically back there, a claim that had no basis in anything that had actually happened on that highway. Marcus kept his hands visible on the steering wheel and asked, calmly and clearly, what specifically he had done wrong. Doyle ignored the question. He leaned one forearm on the roof of the Yukon, looked into the car like he was doing an inventory, and told Marcus to hand over his license and registration. Marcus reached for the glove compartment slowly and deliberately, the way anyone trained in law enforcement learns to move during a stop. No sudden gestures, no surprises. He produced his driver's license and the vehicle registration and handed them through the window. Doyle took them without a word, looked them over, and then looked back at Marcus with the kind of expression that told you his mind had already been made up before he ever left his cruiser. Dana sat completely still in the passenger seat. She had her hands folded in her lap, her eyes forward, her breathing steady. She had been in enough tense situations to know that the worst thing either of them could do right now was give Doyle anything to work with. But she was also watching the highway ahead of them, and in the back of her mind, she was tracking every second that the silver Accord was getting further away. She pressed her thumb quietly against the side of her radio without lifting it, a small signal to the backup units that they were delayed, not compromised, just delayed. Doyle came back to the window faster than expected. He handed the license back and told Marcus that the plates on the Yukon had come up flagged during his check. That was a lie, and Marcus knew it was a lie, because a vehicle with federal operational ties goes through a specific kind of registration that does not throw flags on a routine highway scan. But he didn't say that yet. He took the license back, set it on his knee, and asked Doyle in a level voice what flag he was referring to. Doyle didn't answer that either. Instead, he stood up straight, took a small step back from the door, and told Marcus to step out of the vehicle. Marcus didn't move right away, not out of defiance, out of precision. He asked Doyle once more, clearly, what the legal basis for the stop was, and what specific flag he was referencing. Doyle's tone shifted. It got harder and shorter. He said he wasn't going to ask again. He said he had reason to believe the vehicle was involved in suspicious activity, and that if Marcus didn't step out voluntarily, he was going to make the rest of his night significantly more complicated. That phrase, significantly more complicated, landed in the car like a stone dropped in the still water. Dana turned her head slightly toward Marcus. Just slightly. The kind of movement that means nothing to an outsider, but carries a full conversation between two people who know each other well. Marcus gave the smallest nod. They were both thinking the same thing. They had a fugitive moving down that highway. They had backup units staged and waiting. They had a window that was closing by the minute, and right now, a state trooper with a history of bad stops was standing at their door manufacturing reasons to keep them on the shoulder of I-78 based on nothing more than what they looked like sitting inside a clean, registered vehicle. Doyle wasn't finished. He took a step toward the rear of the Yukon and told Marcus He was going to conduct a search of the vehicle based on his suspicion of criminal activity. He mentioned K9. He mentioned that he could have a unit there in under 10 minutes, and that if Marcus had nothing to hide, then none of this should be a problem. The words were casual, but the meaning behind them was not. He was applying pressure, layer by layer, testing to see how far he could push before something gave. Marcus opened his door and stepped out. He stood at his full height, 6'1", composed, completely still, and looked at Doyle without any anger showing on his face at all. That composure visibly unsettled Doyle, though he covered it quickly with more noise. He told Marcus to move to the rear of the vehicle and keep his hands where he could see them. Marcus walked to the back of the Yukon and stood there with his hands loose at his sides. Dana stepped out of the passenger side without being asked and came around to stand near Marcus. Doyle looked at her like her presence was an inconvenience he hadn't planned for. He told her to get back in the vehicle. She told him, politely and firmly, that she preferred to stand. Doyle pulled out his radio and called for backup. And Marcus Webb looked down the highway one more time at the empty stretch of road where a silver Honda Accord used to be. Doyle's backup hadn't arrived yet when Marcus finally moved. Not toward the car, not away from Doyle. He just turned, slowly and deliberately, and looked at him with an expression that had something new in it. The patience was still there, but the waiting was done. He reached into his jacket with 2 fingers and pulled out a credentials wallet. He flipped it open and held it at Doyle's eye level without saying a single word. On one side was a photo ID. On the other side was a gold badge, the kind that doesn't come from a county sheriff's office or a state barracks, the kind that comes from the federal government of the United States of America. United States Marshal, Marcus Webb. Doyle stared at it. His jaw didn't drop, but something behind his eyes shifted. A quick recalculation happening in real time that he was trying hard not to let show on his face. Before he could speak, Dana stepped forward and opened her credentials wallet. Same badge. Same federal seal. Different name. United States Marshal. Dana Webb. The two of them stood there on the shoulder of I-78, badges out, saying nothing, letting the silence do exactly what it needed to do. Then Marcus spoke. His voice was quiet and unhurried, which somehow made every word land harder. He told Doyle that at the moment his lights came on, they were 11 minutes behind a federally wanted fugitive named Derek Holt, a man with a violent criminal history who had cut off his ankle monitor and been on the run for 9 days. He told him that 2 backup units had been staged down the highway, waiting for their signal. He told him that the silver Accord they had been following for the last 12 minutes was now somewhere past exit 13, and pulling further away from all of them with every passing second. Doyle opened his mouth, then closed it. Marcus slowly folded his credentials wallet and put it back in his jacket. He looked at Doyle one last time, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with the flat, steady eyes of a man who had already decided what happened next wasn't going to be Doyle's choice to make. He reached for his radio. The call Marcus made on that roadside lasted less than 2 minutes. He reported the delay, gave Holt's last known direction, and passed the pursuit to the backup units down the highway. The agents moved fast, but Holt had a 12-minute head start on an open interstate, and by the time they reached exit 13, the silver Accord was parked abandoned behind a gas station with the engine still warm. Derek Holt was gone on foot. A 9-day manhunt that had been minutes away from ending walked out into the dark because a state trooper couldn't let a black couple drive down a highway without a reason to stop them. Doyle stood by his cruiser and watched Marcus and Dana pack back into the Yukon. He didn't apologize. He didn't speak at all. But his body cam had recorded every second of it, every false claim, every manufactured reason, every threat he had made to 2 federal officers conducting an active operation. He didn't know that yet. He would find out soon enough. The formal complaint was filed before the midnight. The U.S. Marshals Service contacted the state police directly, and by the following morning, Doyle had been placed on administrative desk duty, pending a full internal review. The body cam footage was pulled within 24 hours. When his supervisors watched it, there was no debate about what they were looking at. The false flag claim, the unlawful search threat, the K-9 bluff, all of it captured in clear audio and video with timestamps attached. Doyle was suspended without pay 6 days later. A federal obstruction inquiry was opened shortly after that. Derek Holt was caught 11 days later in Pennsylvania, tracked down through a second tip and a coordinated multi-agency effort. He was taken into custody without incident and transported back to face the charges waiting for him. The manhunt ended, just later than it should have, and harder than it needed to be. Marcus and Dana Webb returned to work the next morning. No press conference, no statement, no fanfare. They were marshals. They had a job to finish, and they finished it. The only thing that changed was that one man with a badge and a bias finally had to answer for what he had been getting away with for years. And it was all on camera.
Transparency is an ongoing commitment, and education provides your greatest safeguard. Thank you for watching and empowering a truthful world.